Well, hello, and thank you all of you for coming. First reminder, we are going to record this just to be able to share later in our channels, YouTube and LinkedIn and others. So say hello to the camera and thanks for coming. Well, I'm Christian. I'm software craft person here at Codurance, Barcelona. And I will be the facilitator of this meetup. Um, uh, and as you may know, we are here because we come from the community, the software crafters community. So we want to return to the community what it gives us. So again, thank you. Well, what else? Well, I'm going to introduce Sandro, that is the one that is going to do this meetup. He's going to talk about software modernization, and for that, ones that doesn't know him, he's a really experienced software craft person at Codurance and one of the co-founders. So I don't have a lot to say about him. Himself will talk from himself. So thank you for coming, and well, go ahead.
Another reminder is about the chat and the questions.
Yes, sorry. I will be reading all your questions in the chat, and after he finish, I will be reading and facilitating them to Sandro. So feel free to write them, and I will take a note for that.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'll be answering all the questions at the end. I think it will be easier for me. So let's get started then. So let me see if I can share the right screen. Can you see my screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So this talk is about a strategic approach to software modernization. The inspiration for this talk was some of the work that we've been doing at Codurance for quite a few years, but also remembering when I was working as a developer and trying to drive technical change in organizations. I was not always very successful, let's say, and what we see a lot in organizations, there's a lot of people that identify that there are problems in their software, in their let's say process, and everyone can see the inefficiencies in the ways they work, in their architecture, in their testing strategy, deployment, or the business think that the features are not being delivered fast enough. So everyone can see inefficiencies, but we not always find the right tools and the right approach to drive those changes. So this talk is a bit about that. So I also looked at some of the projects that we had at Codurance. A lot of our work, one way or another, is related to what we now call software modernization. So all the extreme programming practices, all our focus on TDD and crafting software, all this attention to the detail, to architecture, all of those skills. It's funny that over the years, they were not only used to build new systems, but a lot of people wanted to use those skills to actually modernize existing systems. So that's what this talk is about, is basically maybe giving the tools for people that want to drive the change. And that is not only about developers, but also like any person that in an organization, being architects, senior developers in general, project managers, agile coaches, anyone that would like to drive a modernization approach. So I'll try to summarize some of the work that we do and maybe give you a more strategic approach to lead those changes, right? So I think that the first thing to do is to try to even define what software modernization is, right? So the way that I like to define this is that software modernization is a continuous process of improving strategic systems in order to increase business agility. That's how I normally see that. So it is a continuous process, right? And you are focusing that approach in anything that is strategic, right? So, and then I'm getting feedback from someone. So if you could probably mute yourselves, so hopefully we will reduce the feedback. So then, why do we really fail to make the case for it, right? So I think that one of the reasons that I certainly failed in the past to drive technical change is that I was jumping into solutions too quickly, right? So I was always trying to, I saw some problems, and then when I was speaking to other people, I would propose solutions to them. I would go and say, hey, we need to refactor our code. We need to test drive, we need to put more automated tests, or we need to start doing TDD, or we need to re-architect, or we need to go microservices. But all of those things, although a lot of them are very good, they are also solutions. And every time that I was going was a solution, I realized that not everyone else was seeing the same problems. And I think that this is what happens when we speak to developers, when you bring to the same room, developers, testers, product owners, people in infrastructure. So each one of those people, they see problems, but they don't necessarily see the same problems, or at least they see the problems in a slightly different way. So this is the first thing we need to do, is first of all to align those things. But another thing that I also realized, at least myself, I always liked to think that I understand business. And just very recently, after running a company for almost 7 years, I realized that I still don't understand business. And I think that most of the solutions that I was proposing in the past, they were very technical, and I was never addressing the real business issues. And this is already a failure. So that's where I would like to start. So if any one of you, and I'm speaking for myself as well, if you want to drive technical change, one of the first things that we need to understand is what are the business drivers to that change, right? So what are we trying to do? So how can we propose something that will cause a long-lasting impact, as we like to say? And so there is some sort of a foundation, a business foundation that we need to have even before we consider to propose changes, right? So I'm going to try to give you some understanding that some common drivers that you can use. So if you are trying to drive a technical change, see where the change that you're proposing fits business-wise. So here are some of the common drivers for modernization from a business standpoint. So there is what we call sustainable change, innovation, leverage technology, business alignment, people and culture, and risk management. I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail, so hopefully to make a little bit more sense. So let's take sustainable change. One of the premises here is that business can only move as fast as we can deliver quality software. And another mantra that we have is that change is the only constant in software development, right? So in order to have a sustainable change, we need to continuously embrace change. But if you're always embracing change, we are one step from chaos, right? So we still need a lot of discipline, but we cannot be on chaos. But embracing change, if you try to put that in more business terms, so what does it really mean? For example, one of the things that business might want is reduce the lead time. So from the time that someone has an idea until we have software in production implementing that idea, what is the lead time? How long does it take, right? So another aspect of reducing, having sustainable change is reducing the cost of change. This is another very interesting thing. Like, for example, there's a lot of resistance to embrace change, but can we architect our systems? Can we have our systems built in a certain way where the cost of a change is small. Because if you are able to do that, it's much easier for us to embrace change. So once you are, for example, if you want to push a continuous delivery pipeline or automate your builds and tests and stuff, so you cannot just say we need more automated tests. We need to say, hey, what we want to do is to have more frequent releases or reduce the lead time or reduce the cost of change. So that is the business value of those technical practices, right? So another one is innovation. A lot of businesses are struggling to innovate. So they struggle to do business as usual quite often. So even to get a single feature out might take a long time. So if we are struggling to do business as usual, we are struggling even more to do any innovation. So, but in order to innovate, our systems need to be designed in a way where innovation comes cheap, where we can isolate those innovations, where we can make sure that it's safe to experiment and have some feedback loop. So once again, if you want to drive innovation, we need to architect our systems in a way that would allow innovation, right? The code base needs to be in a state where it's easy to innovate. And not only the code base, your production environment. So you can push different features into production, maybe segregate the flow to different areas so you can do testing or A/B testing or things like that. So once again, all of those reasons, first of all, if you want to modernize your system, maybe one of the drivers might be easy to innovate, right? So leverage technology. So a lot of people, we talk about serverless architecture and cloud native and containerization and elastic scaling, all this kind of good stuff, right? So, but quite often, using new technology that could help the business massively in terms of, I don't know, maybe like do some cost reduction or having a more stable production environment or be able to scale according to the business needs. So in order to leverage this new technology, we need to have a system designed in a way where we can also do that. Because quite often people say, well, I cannot migrate to the cloud or use certain services because it will be too expensive. So once again, it should not be so difficult to take parts of your systems and always modernize so that you can benefit from technology. Another thing like business alignment. Some of you may have heard about the Conway's law, right? So not always our systems are built in a way that mimic the business structure, or normally what happens is if the business structure is chaotic, we end up with a chaotic architecture. And over time, as we are fixing the business, the systems, if they're not aligned, because what we can try to do is to do what we call a reverse Conway's maneuver. If you try to re-architect our systems in a way, we can try to push a reorganization upwards instead of having it downwards, as in a Conway's law. So allowing to align the business to the technology makes it easier for different areas of the business to innovate or to evolve without impacting the others. So this is, once again, can be another drive to software modernization. So we can decouple those business areas and we align that to the architecture. One that is very, very interesting is this one. It's different from the other ones in terms of drivers, is people and culture. A lot of companies, they rely on technology, right? So basically they want to hire talent. They want to attract talent and to retain talent, right? But in order for a company to attract talent and retain talent, they need to have an appealing technology stack. So if when the companies have very, very old technology stack, that is dying. The systems are in a chaotic state where developers become not only developers, but any other professionals in the software delivery area, where the current state of the systems and technology is impeding them to progress, to work well, they will be less encouraged to stay there or even to join the organization. So any company that relies on technology and needs talent they need to make sure that they are always modernizing their systems so they can retain those people and attract. And there is risk management as well. So, for example, maybe the production environment is not coping with performance or security, or maybe like we don't have a good way to monitor, or even like, for example, compliance with regulations. So all of those things are risks to the business, right? So in order to mitigate those risks, we might need to also modernize our architecture, our software, our pipelines, and things like that. So in summary here is, if you want to drive technical change, the first thing you need to understand is what benefits you are providing. Let's assume that someone goes ahead with this, like, what is their return on investment? What is getting better in their organization, right? So another thing that we need to look at is the common impediments. So what is impeding companies to modernize their systems? And quite often we hear the same things. We have lack of time, lack of money, lack of skills, or people are just overwhelmed with problems. There's loads of problems, they're too big, or they don't know where to start. There is also a lot of fear, mainly in heavily regulated environments or mission critical systems. Like start touching those systems might increase the risk in organization. Another common block or impediment for software modernization, there were previous attempts in the past. So companies invested a significant amount of money, time into modernizing their systems, and they failed. And now they probably don't want to hear about anymore. So there are many other ones, right? So, but it's important, once again, as a person that is trying to drive technical change, that is trying to innovate, is trying to modernize systems, you need to have those things in mind, right? That's the bare minimum that we need to understand before we have a conversation, right? So with that in mind, then we need to start addressing those things. So, and I in my experience, a lot of people are scared of the word software modernization. They think, oh, it's too expensive, or it's take forever. And I think it's worth defining some principles. Here are just 6 principles. I still need to evolve and work a little bit more on this. But those are 6 principles that I think that are key to modernization when we are speaking to the business. And even for ourselves, for us to understand, to follow those principles. First of all, in a modernization project, we should have a big vision, but should work in small increments, right? So baseline modernization project is a strategic initiative for the company. So we need a big vision, a vision where we would like to be in a few years' time. But we should move in very, very small increments. Those increments, they need to be driven by value, right? So as we make small steps towards that vision, and it's not going to be a straight line, we're going to going a few different directions, but hoping towards the same direction, but not as a straight line. But every increment should have some business value. So that's how we should prioritize. Another thing, minimal or no disruption to business. No disruption is always difficult because there is an investment, at least a financial or time-wise investment in there. I wouldn't say that is a direct disruption, but it is some sort of disruption. But it should be as minimum as possible. We cannot stop the business while we are modernizing their systems, right? So that's very important. Excellence within pragmatic solutions. So let me try to explain this. This goes back to the small increments or an iterative approach. We need to have a vision, but we need to have pragmatic solutions. So we cannot change the entire world in one go. So we need to be a little bit pragmatic. And so normally when we are going for a software modernization initiative, it's because things are not going so well. So we need to be pragmatic in trying to fix those things and not taking forever to fix them. But one of the reasons that we need to modernize is because at some point there was not much attention to quality. So excellence is extremely important. We cannot modernize the system to a system that is as bad as the existing one. So excellence is important. but excellence should exist within pragmatic solutions, right? So we come up with simple pragmatic solutions, but within those solutions, we do an excellent job. I don't like to be the other way around, because chasing excellence without boundaries leads to a lot of wasted effort and not a lot of value delivered. We end up chasing excellence for a very long time and don't deliver much. So if ain't broke, don't fix it. This is extremely important. So don't change things just for the sake of it. So this is a thing. For most of you, this sounds obvious, but if we talk about software modernization initiative to a decision maker, from a stakeholder, someone that can sign the check, they will be scared that you're going to start changing things randomly, right? So this is important. So if it's not broken, we don't fix. And then another one that is very important is the law of diminishing returns. What do I mean by that? We are trying to take something that is not working so well according to a criteria, which I'm going to cover later, and we're going to try to improve that. But there is a limit to how much we improve, because you can keep improving that forever. And that's the same discussion with the excellence I was saying before. So we need to make sure that after some degree of improvement, you start having less return, right? It's the Pareto's law kind of thing, right? So maybe with 20% improvement in the right place in the software, you can create 80% improvement in the business, right? Or in the process or in whatever. But try to chase the last 20% improvement in the business might take 80% of our effort. And that's when you start having the law of diminishing returns. So this is, up until now, what I've been talking should be kind of, easy to agree, but like not in practice. I feel that not everyone, including myself, had that understanding to start that discussion, right? So before we go to the solution, we need to have those things in mind. So then we get to here. Now that we have some basic understanding, we need to start talking about the initiative. So if we were to drive a software modernization initiative, where would we start? Right? So what is the approach? I try to simplify that. Again, this is really related to the work that we normally do in our projects, in our modernization projects. Those are the 5 stages that we go, that we have at the beginning of our project. So the first thing that we try to do is to get a business alignment. I will explain more about what this means. Once we have a business alignment, so while we're doing that, we try to get a technical alignment. Once we have that business and technical alignment, we are ready to create a vision. Once we have a vision, create a strategy, how we're going to go from where we are to that vision technically, and then how we're going to organize our teams or our people in order to tackle that strategy. So that is what we try to do before we start writing code or tests, right? So let's dig into some of those things first. So business alignment. First of all, like those 5 steps, let me go back a little bit. So those 5 steps we recommend to be done. You as a person driving that initiative, you need to convince a diverse set of people to be part of those workshops, if you like to call them. And those would be some people from the business that are stakeholders that could be interested in the business change. And then, for example, project managers, if you have them, or product owners, QA, infrastructure, senior developers, technical leaders, anyone that has some sort of leadership and could represent a group of people within your software delivery organization should be part of it. Of course, don't invite 20 people, but at least 1 or 2 representatives of all those areas should be part of this, because we need an alignment, right? That's the end goal. So we need an approach that everyone buys into. That's what we're trying to achieve here. The first thing in terms of business alignment is to focus the software modernization initiative, right? So one of our largest clients, which we are doing a modernization initiative for them, they have a gigantic system, kind of enterprise level system. So at a very, very, very high level, one of the things that we did was to bring those people into the same room and you try to agree, first of all, what are the main areas of the system? It sounds silly, but you can take people that have been working on the same organization for years, but they are in different groups, like developers, testers, business, or whatever, and you put them in the same group, in the same room, and ask them to define, according to their own view, how their organization or applications are split in terms of functional areas, and they have a completely different view of the system. So we need to align those. First of all, we need to understand what are the core areas that we have. Once we understand that, is where do we start? How do we focus our initiative? Where we cannot rebuild 20 years worth of software and infrastructure that is in there. So we need somewhere to start. So that's why we need to focus. There are different ways of selecting those areas, right? So let's say there is a strategic way of selecting that, and that can be risk management, cost reduction, all this kind of compliance with regulations. So there can be more strategic, business-wise way of selecting an area. Another way of selecting areas is inefficiencies. Maybe you have bad performance. We have a lot of teams banging their heads, working the same areas of the codes. No one can do anything. We need to synchronize the work, code freezes, big release cycles. So that's another way. So inefficiencies in the process or in the architecture, that's another way of selecting areas. And another one that is also common, if you are working in a very large organization or with a very big ecosystem of systems, one good way to get started is by experimentation. So for example, this is quite common in some of our projects. At that very beginning, we don't even know which approach you're going to take. So sometimes it's good to take a small area that is part of the core, but it's still small, still quite safe, and try to run a proof of concept or create an exemplar project in that area. This is how we started with this big client. So we spent a few months in a smaller area, proved the point, learned a lot, worked with them, created a reference architecture with that experimentation. And now we have 2 other projects that were prioritized according to inefficiencies and the strategic value, where we are applying the principles that we learned in the initial project. So this is important because this aligns everyone in where we would start and what is the goal when we start. Once we have those areas chosen, this is another thing that is fascinating. You bring those people from different backgrounds, even if they have been working for the same company for many years, and you ask them, what are the main features? What are the main flows that you have in this area of the system? You have very different answers. And then if you ask them the pain points, once again, each one of those people experience different kinds of pain points. And then desired improvements is the same thing. So they want certain improvements in certain areas because in their head, they're addressing different problems. So this kind of alignment is essential, right? So that we all understand what are the different pain points and desired improvement main features. And one way to achieve that is also to understand the path to production, or what we call value stream mapping. So here is a picture of one exercise that we've done with a different client, also quite large client. And we brought like 8 people into the room from different areas, let's say. And we asked them how the process is from an idea until software goes to production. So when the product owners and business people were describing, they described it the left-hand side, and they described a lot of things that go on in there. Where the developers, testers, operations, they had no clue how much work is there from an idea until it becomes an item in a backlog that we will eventually fed into a team. And then the developers had their own process and merge and branches and stuff like that. And then the QAs came in and said all the pain that they have to set up the different environments and databases and so on and so forth. And production services came in as well and said, hey, this is what we need to do. All of a sudden, all those different people explained to everyone what their process were. And when we finished this after 2 hours, everyone looked at it and was like, whoa, we had no clue that this is how we work. So the value stream mapping is one of our favorite exercises because in a very short period of time, we can map an entire value stream and highlight all the issues, all the waste, all the amount of rework that we have in our systems, all the inefficiencies. And these exercises can be a good source of information for us to prioritize work in our modernization initiative. So up until now, the alignment that we've been doing with the business is regarding the current state of the system, the main features, pain points, desired improvements, and even how the process is. So now we need to start having a look forward. So, okay, this is where we are. What's happening next? Where the business is going? So then we need to understand the strategy, the vision, the direction that that business area has. So then we need to have a look at our portfolio management, or even a milestones and strategies, or even backlogs. Like, so not all organizations have a portfolio management. Not all organizations work with milestones and roadmaps. Some organizations are smaller or simpler and they just have backlogs. But regardless how the future vision is organized, we need to have a look at it and understand where they are going, because whatever we do to modernize their systems, we need to make sure that we support the business direction, not only improving what we have, but also enable the business to move forward. Another interesting aspect is the business constraints, right? So understand external deadlines. So what are the constraints? So if we are doing this, what constraints do we have business-wise? Maybe there is external deadlines. Maybe there are regulations, certifications, lack of skills, the structure of the company, right? So some of those constraints are real constraints, and we cannot move. They are what I call immovable constraints. For example, an external deadline for a regulation. So by a certain date, it will become law, and if we are not compliant, we cannot trade. So that's a significant deadline that we need to respect. So whatever we do, we need to have that in mind. That cannot be, we need to meet that deadline, right? But other deadlines might not be immovable. Or the company structure, some of them you say, you know what, it's not worth trying to reorganize the entire company, because that's not going to happen. Let's treat it as a constraint, and we will work within the current structure of the company. But in other cases, sometimes it's possible to make some changes in the structure of the company. So this debate here is very important. What can be moved, or what can be changed, what cannot be changed, in order to enable or facilitate our approach. And then there might be a few OKRs, KPIs, metrics, and stuff that's always worth understanding. I'm going to go jump for the next one, because I like this one better. So the other ones are important. They're business metrics, OKR, KPIs, and so on and so forth. We need to understand and know what they are and why we cannot meet them. But in terms of software modernization, there is a book called Accelerate. I strongly recommend that you all read that book if you haven't already. That book is phenomenal, and it talks about many things. It shows all the research that they've done. So most of their opinions, if not all, are backed by data, and they came up with 4 key metrics for high-performing organizations, let's say. One is the deployment frequency, right? So how often do we deploy? Another one is lead time. So from an idea to software in production, or well, in this case, it's a bit more restricted. It's from when software is finished by development until you get to production. That's the lead time that they're talking about. They're not talking about the full lead time from idea. And then the mean time to restore. So if something goes wrong in production, how quickly can we fix that? And then the change failure rate. So basically, like how many bugs, how many errors we have in our system and stuff, right? So there are, for me, those 4 key metrics, they represent the technical maturity of a company. And I think that they serve as a good guideline for any modernization work, is to improve those 4 metrics. There is, we also worked with a lot of companies that are in regulated environments, and also companies where they have, they deploy on-premise. So for companies, so those are part of the constraints, right? So deploying multiple times a day into production is not necessarily the end goal for every company. In some heavily regulated environments, or if you are deploying into hardware, right? So you have embedded systems, for example. Maybe deploying so frequently is not a good idea. However, deploying to production should be a business decision and not a technical constraint. So this is a different way of looking at the same thing. So we should be able to deploy to production whenever the business wants to go to production, and not whenever technology is ready. So I think that a good metric would be always being ready to go to production. So that would show the maturity. So this part is about business alignment. So it's extremely difficult to get there, but if we fail to get this alignment, we have no chance to drive a technical change, or our technical change will always be a very small change, right? So those are the foundation. Once we've done that, so if we were able to align everyone in pain points and what they want to achieve and stuff, then we go to the technical alignment. Technical alignment is a very similar thing, but on the technical sphere. The first thing we need to understand the current solution, the overall architecture. So that means not only the system or the area that we are interested, but the entire ecosystem. How does this area or this system fits into the wider ecosystem of the company? So this allows us to understand the amount of dependencies that we might need to deal with, or how loose coupled or coupled this area is from other places, right? So, and then internally as well, all the different components. So you start going to lower level of details, technically wise, understand how the solution was built internally. And another exercise that we like to do a lot is what I call functional mapping. And this is important, that the technical alignment is also done with the business people, because we need to build a shared vocabulary, not only at the business level, but also on the technical level. I'm not expecting them to understand very, very technical terms and to discuss the difference between outside-in TDD and loose coupling and solid principles. That's not what I'm saying. But they need to understand what are the core modules, the core systems that they have, and how they are mapped into the business flows. So that's what the mapping the business flows into the respective components or services or systems is important, because when we talk about a business flow, everyone should understand which functional areas, which systems, which modules are involved. So when we change them, what impact they would have, right? So that's the common understanding. And then we do a very similar thing that we've done for the business. So what are the pain points on the technical side? What are the desired improvements? Why are they pain points in the first place? So if we improve them, what kind of benefit we would have, right? So if we had more unit tests, great. Why do we want that? Oh, of course, we can reduce the QA cycle. Oh, that's great. We can have it a repeatable process. Great, we can trust it more. We can reduce human error. Great. So this is a more sensible discussion. Just say, this is what the value that you're going to have if we modularize our system, if we automate the test, if we re-architect the system. That's what we're looking for. And then what are the risks? So in another project that I mean, again, mission critical, healthcare industry, the risks in modernizing the systems are gigantic. Like an error in production, although we have a node legacy system that is very fragile, very brittle, it's somehow working. Everyone is scared to touch. Every time there is a change, everyone is very scared, and the QA cycle takes months. But start hacking that code away and modernizing it and refactoring it and stuff increases the risk significantly. And we need to be aware of what those risks are and how we're going to mitigate them. So the technical constraints, I want to go a little bit deeper into them because they are important. So the understanding the technical constraints will shape the vision, the technical vision that we need to create. So let me try to explain. One of our clients they are in a regulated environment. So we have quite a few clients in the regulated environment, and that's why it's so difficult to modernize in that area, because there are tons of constraints. So, but they have an extra constraint that is not common. In their world, every client that they have, every client of their systems, they need to have their own instance of the system. They are in the healthcare industry, so every client, and there are hospitals, clinics and doctors and stuff like that, because of the regulations and segregation of data policies and stuff, every client, and they have thousands, they have like more than 15,000 clients. So they have more than 15 instances of the system, and their system is split. Not only there is the cloud solution, but they also have on-premise solution, so the same software, and they have more than 4,000 on-premise installations. So when you have an environment like that, you cannot go microservices. If the architecture of your system is too is broken in too many movable pieces, your production environment will be horrendous. The upgrading systems will be very difficult. So in this case, we had to stick with a modular monolith, right? So, and we cannot benefit from certain things that cloud providers have, because it doesn't make sense in their environment. So this is why it's so important to understand the technical constraints, because it will shape completely our technical vision, right? And everyone needs to be aware of that, because those constraints impose costs as well, right? So up until here, we have business and technical alignment, right? So it's important that, once again, that all those different types of people are in the same workshops or part of the same discussions, because we all need to understand all those things. Why we need to improve certain things, why is it painful in certain areas, what are the constraints and the risks, so on and so forth. If we are able to do that, and this is not an easy thing to do, mainly if you are a single lone wolf trying to drive the technical change alone, it is quite hard. But if you don't do that, you will never be able to drive anything strategic, right? So, or to be very difficult at least. So this is what we try to do first, get that aligned. Once we are there, now the easy part starts, and now the fun part starts. That's where we, most technical people, like to think about the future, the new technologies, how the world will look like once we start changing everything. That's when we start talking about the technical vision. The technical vision, the way that I like to create technical visions, is to think that I have, first of all, to understand that's not going to be a diagram that we do today and that will be the same diagram forever, right? No, a technical vision is, I like to say, is a direction. It's not a plan, it's a direction, but it's also a moving target. It points sort of north or northwest, points your direction, but I don't know precisely the point. I know that it's just there. So, and with that, this direction, we need to start saying, okay, if we need to address all those pain points, all those business ambitions, so on and so forth. And that's when we start thinking about the architecture, the technology, deployment, testing, everything else, right? So whatever the technical vision will be, we need to make sure, in order for us to, I don't like to use the word sell it, but if you are the one driving that, that's what you are doing. You are trying to convince people, say, hey, we agreed on the problems, but where would you like to be? So we need to take all of those things into account, right? So the priorities, the inefficiencies, the constraints and stuff like that. And the vision will be co-created with those people. We can create a skeleton and start refining with everyone, with the business, with QA, and so on and so forth. And then once everyone, the advantage of doing that together is that once everyone agrees with that, everyone is excited. And so, wow, is it even possible to do that? Wow, we were discussing all the problems and now we have this thing in here. It would be awesome if you had that. So you have that excitement. And that's what we need to drive the change. But of course, that once we have the excitement, so like a lot of people will be skeptical and say, well, yeah, it's awesome, looks amazing to be awesome, but it will take forever or probably will never gonna happen. And a lot of people will be very skeptical. And so that's where a more specific and technical work comes in. We need to create a strategy to go from where we are to that vision, right? So, and here it's difficult to prescribe. This entire talk is not prescriptive in terms of the techniques themselves, because each company, each modernization initiative will be different from each other, right? So normally what they want to achieve is very similar, but how you are going to achieve that is significantly different. So here there are multiple levels that we need to have in mind in order to create a strategy, right? So for example, a very, very high level is, are we going to rewrite the solution? Are we going to re-architect? Are we going to refactor? Are we going to re-platform, re-host? So there are quite a few of those. Again, it really depends on which problems we discovered in the alignment. During the alignment stage, we have a lot of ambitions and we create that vision. So sometimes if we are migrating from old technology, let's say we have systems in proprietary technology, and we are not only, we are rebuilding, well, we need to move to a new technology, we need to rebuild it. So we cannot, because we will be moving away from the technology, but different programming language, different ecosystem, different production environment. Sometimes the technology is fine, like the programming language is fine, the production environment, like, no, is AWS, is Google Cloud or Azure or whatever. So they are, the system is messy, the architecture is messy, but the technology itself is still good. So we might need to re-architect a bit, refactor a bit. Most of the initiatives that we have are hybrid. I never found any initiative, modernization initiative, where we could just say, oh, it's a rewrite, it's a refactor, it's a re-architect, it's a re-platform. No, normally it's a combination of all of those things, right? So, and in there, this is the first level of conversation we need to have. What are the advantages, disadvantages, and risks in each one of those approaches? But this is a very, very simplistic view when we are discussing a technical strategy to modernization. I don't even like much to talk about this because it's so high level. And because I know that most of them will be hybrid anyway, I prefer to talk at a different level. So it's basically like, how do we even prioritize? So for example, in certain clients, we have functional areas. They say, hey, that our payments area, so the payment side of our system is a bit unstable. Sometimes we miss payments, sometimes we charge twice, or I don't know, like it falls apart, it doesn't hold the load, or we want, every time that we want to add a new payment method is a pain because we need to retest the whole thing, or we have, for example, we need to be compliant with the, what is it called in payments? Forgot now, it's tip of my tongue, but so when you hold credit card data, PCI, you need to be PCI compliant, and because the system is a monolith, the entire application needs to be PCI compliant, not only because you cannot decouple the payment system. So this, for example, is a typical example. This is a typical example where we would focus on an area in a very holistic way. You're not going to take one problem of the area. You're going to take the full area and analyze all the problems, all the issues in there, and come up with an initiative, a strategy to modernize the area as a whole. Sometimes it might be different. In other approach, we say, hey, we need to modernize our system, but we cannot stop the business. So why don't we take a few new features that are coming into the pipeline, and we use the new features to try out a new approach, a new architectural pattern, a new service, or a new way of deploying, or whatever. So then we build the new features as a separate service or artifact from the rest of the code base, and we just redirect the system. So everything that is coming from the old flow goes to the normal system, and then what comes from the new features goes to another system. And we try that approach. And if it works, then gradually start migrating the old features to the new ones. So, and we can go on forever. So those are different ways of prioritizing. One that I found very interesting is a business flow that I want to mention. So for example, in one of our clients, they have 300 internal employees that use their systems to do a lot of things with their clients and stuff. But because their systems were old, and the workflow that those people have is fragmented. They need to do a little bit in one system, they need to switch to another system and then input some data again, and then they need to do something else, and then there is a batch job overnight that moves data from one database to another. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the business flow because the systems were not built to automate that flow. So this is a different approach, a different strategy to tackle for modernization approach. And then usability, code hotspots, for example. There are areas of the system where multiple teams are always banging their heads. You know that those big classes at the core of the system, that everyone needs to change that, and everyone is scared, and they have merge problems and all this kind of nonsense. So this is a different way to prioritize work. So as I was saying, like this approach in here for me is far more interesting to debate than if it's a rewrite. If it's for me, those things will come after later, right? So another thing to talk about with strategy is the techniques themselves and the architecture. So are you going to go with a modular monolith? If you're going to do that, the strategic approach to get there is one. If you're going to go from a monolith to microservice, the strategy to go from a monolith to microservice is completely different from the, or are you going to use a stronger fig? Or we are going to do just segregate the operational requirements, like all the logging, monitoring, and stuff. So all of those things are completely different techniques. And it's a much better way for us to discuss as well the strategy, right? Because they bring different business values and they bring completely different technical challenges. And those are normally chosen according to the technical, the business inefficiencies that we want to fix, and the kind of technical problems that we have and constraints. So all of those things, if you are creating a strategy, that's some background knowledge that you need to have in order to drive that strategy. And then I won't dwell too much in here, but modularization is key to most modernization projects. Most often than not, the systems are built in a way where you cannot isolate the parts that you are interested, so that you can stabilize, so that you can do what you need to do, right? So everything is entangled. So most modernization initiatives will have a significant degree of modularization. Modularization doesn't mean microservices. Let's be very, very clear, all right? So let me just give you, I'll cover that later. Well, I'll go there first. So the modules can be, for example, a group of services can be a module. For example, in one of our clients, their payment area was a module, but the payment area was composed by a group of services, right? So, or it can be a single service, can be a library, can be a jar file, a component, or it can be just namespaces, right? So conceptual components, but all of them can be considered modules. But there will be some level of modularization, because that's the only way for you to start localize the changes, right? So if you want to modernize the system, you need to make changes, you need to make those changes safer. For that, they need to be localized. You need to reduce the cognitive load. So when you look at a piece of code, you don't need to understand the entire system, right? So a lot of companies will say, oh, we don't have tests, so we should build tests first. Well, good luck trying to build tests for a monolith with 16 million lines of code. So that's a situation we had to deal with before. So we need some sort of modularization so that we'll be more efficient to build fast and reliable tests. So modularization will always help us to do those kind of things. Even continuous delivery. Continuous delivery doesn't necessarily mean releasing the entire ecosystem of systems in one go and continuously. So normally you achieve continuous delivery, being able to release bits and bobs of your system continuously. So one team improves one module of the system, they release. Another team improves a different module of the system, they release. So another team, creates a new feature in another module they release. That's the continuous delivery. It's not delivering the entire thing. So modularization will help with that. So all of those things are they are knowledge that you need to have in order to come up with a strategy to satisfy that vision and address those issues that we found in the alignment. And finally, once we have that strategy, we have that vision, we know what we're trying to do, how are we going to organize ourselves? So again, there are many different ways of achieving that. I'm not prescribing each way is better because it really varies from place to place, from problem to problem. But a common approach for us, because we are a consultancy, we are an external company hired to help companies to modernize their systems. So a common approach in this environment is to have a dedicated team to push some of the improvements. Sometimes this dedicated team is a cross-functional team because we are working in a functional area, in a business area. Sometimes it's a team of specialized people. So basically they are a smaller team with a lot of knowledge in automation or in AWS or in a specific technology. So it's still a dedicated team, but not cross-functional. They are specialized in a specific area. So, but in other companies that I worked for, so another way of doing that, we have a unified backlog. Instead of having a separate technical backlog and a separate product backlog, we have a single backlog and we prioritize by value. And the same team is doing everything, business features and modernization. And then we can have many other variations. Like at UBS, when I was there, we had 20% of the time for each iteration allocated to technical improvements. And the team we were responsible to decide what that 20% would be, right? So that was the agreement that we had with the business, because we had to deliver business value, but the system was falling apart in certain areas. So that's how we solved it. So there are many different ways of doing that. And then just make sure that whatever you do, run as a proper project, right? So have a roadmaps, milestones, do that in an incremental approach. So treat it as a project. It's not a thing that you do on the side, right? Almost hidden in your spare time. So that's the summary. So if you want to drive a strategic approach, you need the first two, the business alignment and technical alignment. They are key. If you don't get that, you will not create a long-lasting software modernization initiative, right? So you will not get the support, and yeah, it won't be that strategic. And then you come with the fun part that I call, mainly for technical people like myself, is creating that vision, creating that strategy, creating that approach, which is a good fun. And then at that point, we are ready to start iterating. Once again, those things can be done in a space of a few days to a few weeks, depending on the size of the organization, the size of the project, the size of their systems, the amount of departments involved. Again, with someone with experience and the buy-in from the people, from the business QA, so on and so forth. If they are all interested to improve things, they will need to dedicate a few days, maybe a few weeks, to get to that stage. If we get there, then it's about creating backlogs and start iterating and showing progress, and keep aligning the direction, keeping aligning the vision as we progress, as in any other agile delivery project. So if you are in a very, very large organization, I don't want to talk much about because it probably won't apply to a lot of people, you can create what we call a continuous improvement program, and that will have many different sources of improvements, and those can be different business areas, can be people looking in QA or operations or Kappa initiatives or whatever. So all of those desired improvements will go for a steering group that will filter that, understand the value, so on and so forth, create a company backlog, and then distribute to the appropriate teams, right? I'm not going to go into detail. If you want to know more about that, you can ask the questions and I will respond. So that's about it. So I think that this is, I prefer to skip that one. So that's what I had to say. So yeah, any questions?
Thank you, Sandro.
Thank you, Sandro.
Thanks, Sandro. Here one question. Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. It's related with the team size. Do you see any correlation between the size of the different teams with the performance, or with this modernization?
So the way, for example, are you saying, for example, when we create a modernization team, a team that will be dedicated to the modernization approach? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's in general related to the this methodology of creating the squads. In general, in any organization, is there any preferred best approach to team management in terms of size? Like, it's better to create small teams or squads or multidisciplinary teams, or this kind of things related to people management and teams, which in your experience has an impact in the modernization?
Yeah, normally, like when you create the teams, they are smaller teams, like agile teams. I think that as soon as the team goes beyond what we normally say, like 7 + 2 or -2, so things get very complicated. We recently had this experience. We had a team of, if I'm not wrong, we were 6. We grew to 9, and that became quite chaotic for us to organize ourselves. And then we end up splitting the teams, and now we have a team of, then we grew a little bit more. So now we have one team of 7, one team of 5. So I normally prefer still small teams. So for the modernization work. And if you want to do more or parallelize work, I would have different squads as you would do in a normal delivery project.
I see. Thank you. Thank you for
I'm
that.
just trying to
We have 2 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
This one from Albert Villa. He asks, you have mentioned the 20% of tech improvement in UBS. How do you convince business that software requires tech work, not directly business related?
With that alignment that I was describing at the beginning. So they will be, they will have concerns, right? So, for example, let's try to answer in a different way. If I am seeing inefficiencies, and I think that we should improve system, if I cannot express the business value, or if the business people cannot see the inefficiencies, you will never convince them. Right? So because you are trying to ask them time to do something that is a solution to a problem that they don't see. So this is why it's so important, that business alignment that I was mentioning at the beginning, is to understand from their perspective, where are the inefficiencies? Maybe they are saying we are not delivering fast enough, or maybe they are saying we cannot go to production fast enough, or maybe they are saying we have a too long, we always have a lot of bugs and too much QA. The QA cycle is too long. That's your hook. It's okay. So those are the business areas. So if I want to improve something, does this thing that I want to improve affect those things or not? Because if you cannot say, if you cannot understand the business value, the business impact of the technical change that we want, of course, we'll never convince them. But there are things, to be fair, that they might not see. So they might see some problems. For example, a very common one that they normally don't see that is when teams are working on the same set of systems and they keep banging their heads against each other, right? So they need to synchronize things. Or for example, you need to build a feature, but in order for that to be complete, you need to wait for the other team to provide an API for you that is also waiting for the production people to create an environment for them to test. So those inter-team dependencies that are more on the technical side, sometimes they don't see, but this is how we can go to them and say, hey, that's why things take so long. That's why we need to synchronize. If we modernize the system, or if we improve this or that, we can remove those dependencies, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And there is another question from Bernat. He asks you if you did talk about change the mindset of the members of the team in an old-fashioned dev team. I think you didn't mention, but maybe it's worth mentioning how to manage this kind of situation.
Change the mindset.
Pardon? I think I have a bit of experience on that. I will share it. I was in an old-fashioned dev team, and the only way we found to fight against that, it was to go bit by bit, doing small sessions, trying to convince people with valuable things to deliver. So that was our path. I don't know if you agree on that.
I think that yes, I do agree, but also there are different levels of mindset as well. So, for example, if you are talking about very, very low level, at a team level, pair level, for example, oh, some people don't want to write tests. That's one degree, right? So another one is to create a complete a vision for a modernization program that will re-architect a bunch of their systems. So they are on a completely different level of abstraction, right? So, and you can have people that are old-fashioned at all levels. Old-fashioned in terms of using modern agile practices, or even old-fashioned in terms of technology, architecture, ways of organizing teams and structure. So those ones here are harder. It's very difficult to do gradually, right? You don't do it at the same speed that you do the TDD. Oh, pair with me, let's see this test. The other one is more radical because the impact is much bigger once you start. Mm-hmm. So that one, you need to go more on the, what problems do we have? You don't go with a solution. I think this is the root of all problems. We go with a solution. We want someone to write tests without explaining why we're trying to do that. Or we want to re-architect an entire system without explaining why we want to do that.
Yeah. Another one from Jorge. What's your experience measuring development, deployment frequency and lead time, the complete one or the cycle time in mid-long size companies? How do you recommend to implement each of them? What are the problems you think we should avoid or been pending about while implementing them? And great talk, by the way.
Thank you. So normally this data is already there. This is another thing that is fascinating, right? So we have got a few clients that come to us and say, hey, can you help us to get that information? Once you mention those metrics, it's like, oh, can you help us to, how do we measure that? It's like, you already have this data, you know, right? So you just don't know exactly where to find, but this data is there. So for example, finding how many times you go to production is quite easy. You just ask people that push system to production. So if the teams are doing that, you can ask them. If they have a wall where they go for QA cycle, the QA cycle throws over the wall to the operations or production services, then we see like, for example, in UBS, we had a schedule, right? So each team and each department had a schedule. We had a window, as we called. Our team, for example, we had 2 weeks every 4 months or something like that. If we were not ready at that time, bang, we were gone just in 4 months' time. So one of our clients, they release last release was more than a year ago. So it's very easy to know how often. So the data is there. It's just to gather. That's the release. The cycle time is a little bit harder, but you can also probably get that information. But it will rely on the kind of tooling that we use in your process. For example, you have Jira tickets. The Jira tickets are used by whom? It's just by the teams, by the QA, by the ops. So we need to try to trace that. But the information is there somehow. We just need to dig into the tooling and the process.
Yeah. Well, we have another one in Spanish. I will try to translate it. How do you recover the confidence from the business side when you already tried some of these improvements and they didn't get enough results?
That's an awesome question. I mentioned that one of the biggest impediments for this kind of initiative is when they were burned, right? They tried and failed, for whatever failed means in this context. So my experience in doing that is you reduce the size of the commitment. I'll try to explain. If you go to them and say, hey, I need X millions of euros or pounds, and I will be working for 3 years, rebuilding everything. And we will be done. And when we are done, we will be surprised with everything, all the amazing stuff that we've done. As a huge commitment. You are asking for a huge commitment, a lot of trust up front. So big chance you're gonna get a big no in your face, right? So a way to try to build that trust is if you work in very small increments. As I said, build a big vision, something that is appealing. People say, fuck, I want that, right? So it would be awesome if you had that. But we're gonna focus on the first step. Once we do the first small step, we review. Is that vision still a good thing or not? We can recalibrate or not? Next small step. So you ask them for the experiment. You ask them the step. And as you are iterating, hopefully we will be building that credibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you allow me to add something more on that, Sandro.
Not you, no.
Yeah. One thing to ask there is, why did it fail last time? So a lot of time, if you come to the table and you're like, hey, we want to do this thing. Yeah, but we already tried that. It didn't work before. And you understand why it didn't work, and you show what you're doing in order for that not to happen again. So in other words, you're showing that you're taking care of things, and you're really what's the word?
Mitigating those risks?
Yeah, I'm looking for a different word, but yeah, let's say mitigating those things and showing how you're handling them, and how you're and providing also visibility about that process, not just focusing on adding value quickly, but showing that how things are going. That helps build that trust a lot faster, right? Because it's a lot of the times you find this, you go to a company, hey, we want to do this. We already tried that and it didn't work. And the next question is, okay, why it didn't work? They don't know. So if they don't know, there's a learning opportunity there that they didn't take, right? You're probably going to hit the same walls, right? And taking care of that goes a long way to show that, you actually want to get this done, and you learn from previous mistakes, right? So that would be my...
Yeah, this also is part of that alignment as well, right? In those alignments, you understand their risk, the risks, their fears. So is what Jose was saying is very important. Is understanding what happened before. If that if we perceive that to be an issue, that they are skeptical because they tried and failed, we certainly need to dig into that, like almost like as a psychologist, right? So we just really need to know what happened in the past and why they are so traumatized, right? Anyone else?
No.
More questions?
We don't have any more. Don't be shy.
Maybe
Yes.
it's very clear.
Isaac. Isaac is asking, are there any reading materials or courses you can recommend for technical people, developers, for example, to prepare them for such conversation with business people and stakeholders?
Oh, that's a great question. So, sort of, I would say. There are a few books that are good. I think that books like Phoenix Project is a good book to understand. For this, more specific to the talk, in the concept of software modernization, some of the approach, we are trying to create some material as well. So there were a few blog posts that we released recently. If you go to the Codurance website and the publications, you can probably see some of the software modernization blogs, and there are blogs on how to make a business case, and we are evolving. We want to create a lot of material in that area, but there are some also excellent books in there. The Phoenix Project is a great book. I really like that one. I don't know if there is anything else that would give this more holistic view, because the problem with all of these is that it's a very holistic view, right? So the business side, the technical side, and then the individual strategies and the microservices and the refactorings. So there is knowledge at many different levels. And so we will be trying to create this material, but I don't think that there is a single source. I don't know if Jose knows any other book maybe that could lead people to.
Yeah, regarding managing change, because in the end you're talking about that, right? That there's the technical aspect, that there's lots of challenges around that, but in the end, it's trying to get people rowing in the same direction, kind of, right? And in that you can look at John P. Cotter's work. So there's a Harvard Business Review article that says why transformation efforts fail. It's a short paper, I think around 50 pages, and it talks about all of the points where people usually fail when they're trying to launch something like this. And the tools that you mentioned, Sandro, they all fit to specific areas of that, right? Either communication, alignment, etc., etc. So that's a good place to start. And if you look into the whole change model that Cotter has with the heart of change and all of these books that he already wrote, like Leading Change and all of that, you're gonna find lots of tools that will help you, definitely, whether you're doing this at the team level or you're doing this at the functional level or organization in general. You can get a lot of stuff there. So yeah, The Heart of Change and Leading Change by John P. Cotter, plus the Why Transformation Efforts Fail.
And then there is all the technical side. There are loads of different books and stuff in architecture, in technical strategies and design, and so it's worth DevOps and cloud. So you need to have some understanding. And, one thing that I need to be, now that we are thinking, like, it's very difficult for one person to have all this knowledge. That's another thing that, so driving the technical change doesn't mean that that you need to hold all this knowledge yourself. You need to have a good understanding of those areas, but you can bring the experts with you, right? So you can have people from your organization, from outside, to help you to make that case, to give you more foundation when you are trying to push those initiatives.
Yeah. We have another question here from Nicolas. How do you deal with management that doesn't want to be deep involved in this project? What if a lot of processes and organization problems are because of unprepared management and bad management practices?
Well, so there are also different levels of management as well. So, for example, some companies have a few layers of management. And I think that depending on where those managers are, the strategy might be probably different, right? So I'm not the most qualified person to talk about that, but like normally I would always try to come up with the problems that we are having. I think that I'm repeating myself, I know that, but like a lot of those problems is because people are pushing solutions and not trying to agree with problems first. Because those people, they might see problems. They might see things that are impeding them to do a good job, or that creates a problem with their own bosses, right? So trying to understand what the problems would help. However, I fully get you. I fully hear you that it's not always like that. Some people are closed and they don't see that and they don't care. They just want to manage the project. What is your next task done or not? You promised this and I don't care. I don't care what you're trying to achieve, and they're measuring the outputs, not the outcomes, right? As we say. If you're having a problem, if you cannot do at that instance, I would go above. I would try, but if I cannot, I would go above. But if you are speaking to the founders of the company, the founders don't want to see or they don't buy, then you need to see, is it you that are failing to communicate? Or maybe there is an incompatibility between what you want and what the senior management of the company wants.
They shared another book called Multipliers. Do you know it? It's not technical, but really helps to have this conversation and deal with different kinds of personalities. So just for you to know.
Cool. All right. Any other questions?
I think I
No.
went through all of them. I'm just checking. Well, a lot of people giving thank you
So
you all. So I think we're
done.
Great talk. Thanks, Sandro.
Okay, thank you very much.
Everyone,
Pleasure.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed it. I think it's the first time I hear you live, so that's because I heard it in a video. Was quite different.
Yeah, I had more time this time as well. The other one was a bit more constrained.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, good. Thank you very much for arranging this, and I had a good time. Everyone, it's a pleasure.
thank you, Sandro. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
See you soon.